What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say you need to switch from being your employee's buddy to being their boss? Maybe you think of Meryl Streep's character in Devil Wears Prada, an ultra-successful fashion designer who also happens to be a complete... Well, I won't say what on the podcast, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. That's the picture that may pop into our heads when we think about being a boss, and I've got that in inverted quotes, to someone. That we fit into this authoritarian, strict, no-nonsense role. So we either do our best to mimic that archetype or we swing a completely different direction because we don't want to be her. And we become our employees' best friends, chatting in the office about weekend plans rather than getting things done, or letting boundaries be pushed and eventually creating a work environment where there is little respect or rules or sense of priority. So are these our only options? You're either an authoritarian dictator or the rule-breaking office best friend? Well, no. This is a dichotomy we've created in business culture, and it's time to add a little nuance. So if you've ever felt torn between being your employee's friend and their boss, or you're unsure how to keep being relatable and respected as you grow into your CEO role, or you've even felt uncomfortable having to draw boundaries as your team grows, today's episode is for you. Welcome to the HerBusiness Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of women entrepreneurs making their mark. I'm your host, Susie Daphnis, CEO at HerBusiness. My guest today is Michelle Pascoe, a longtime member of the HerBusiness Network and an expert in creating an exciting and engaged workplace, developing and delivering programs for frontline team members and their leadership teams. And she's done this for 30 years. For 30 years, she's worked in the hospitality industry and has spoken at countless international conferences and events. In 1994, she founded her business called Optimum Operating Procedures and Services, otherwise known as OOPS. And this is a respected training company that thrives in mystery shopping, service benchmarking, surveys, focus groups, audits, team training, leadership development, as I mentioned earlier. And she really has this expertise at bridging traditional values and professional skills, and it makes her a real specialist in service operations. And I can't wait for you to hear her expertise on how to navigate the transition into leadership and how to go from being a buddy to a boss. Hey, Michelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Susie. I'm so looking forward to this. We've known each other for decades now, and it's wonderful to have this opportunity to have a chat.
Well, I'm very excited because this is a topic you and I have been talking about for a little while now. And I know it's one that's very relevant to our women who are growing teams and growing businesses and finding themselves in a different role in their business than when they first started. So we're talking about this transitioning from a buddy to a boss. And while it can be equally exciting, it's also a little bit daunting. And so I'd love to know, from your experience, what are the first crucial steps someone should take to ensure that smooth transition into stepping away from perhaps a very flat structure in their business into more of a CEO or leadership role?
It's a great question. And I think for many solopreneurs, when they start that journey, we do everything. When you and I first started, Susie, all those decades ago, we did everything. And then, and we're good at that. We're good at, wearing all these different hats. However, when we do need to bring somebody else in the team, the first thing to realize, and I know it's hard to realize, that nobody can read your mind and they can't be as exactly the same as you. And that's probably the biggest hurdle, because we feel that we're really good at this skill set. And then, oh, yes, we are to train somebody else. But you may be good at a skill set. You may not just be able to transfer that as well. So first off, it's really taking that thought process and believing in yourself that you can be a good boss. So let's call them that as a CEO, etc.
Right.
Because we hear a lot of people, Susie, say, oh, I wouldn't know how to manage people, because they hear different things on the grapevine. You have to be confident in yourself that you can be a boss, understand that not everybody's going to think like you, and that you have to start writing down systems and processes. That's probably the first key. It can't just come from your head and expect somebody to go, oh, yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that stepping into a boss, a lot of us started because we had a passion, we had a
Mm.
need to run a business, and now suddenly I'm having to manage people. I never signed up for this. I didn't know if I'm good for it. And I know for me, in the first few years, I really didn't want to do that part of it. I wanted to do the marketing and be the front person in the business and do the publicity and do all those sorts of things. But as we do grow, we do need to change how we think about our role. And in leading up to this interview, as I love to do, I spoke to some of our Her Business Network members who are growing teams and asked them what are their questions around this very topic. And one person said, I find it hard to know how to be respected and be relatable. I struggle to not overshare. And also, as the team has grown, I have to consistently remind people that they don't report to me anymore as roles have changed. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, and it's a question that comes up time and time again. And this is where hindsight is a wonderful thing, Susie, because I even said to my daughter, who has a large day spa, when she first started up being young, I know they're your employees and they're a similar age, but you aren't their friends. Oh, and she said to me, Mum, you're being awfully harsh. But now, multiple years on, a very large team. And that's the same with all of us, no matter what generation we're from. When we start off, particularly we have one person, we are usually quite close to them and we share and, when we have lunch together and things. But what you have to start being very clear about when you start looking at building a team is you have to create these boundaries. It's boundaries for you, but it's also boundaries for them, Susie. If I can give you an example, I'd always had offices off-site. And then just before 2019, I brought the office back into my home and I had a brand new EA because my long-term one had been away off on maternity leave. And I was in one office and she was in another and I'd have this brilliant idea and I'd yell out to her and I go, I got this, because that's the way I operate. So anyway, when it came up, a few weeks on, she came and she was very upset. She goes, I don't like the way you yell at me because I'm concentrating on something else. And oh my goodness, I was absolutely mortified because, see, I still saw her as this more of that buddy. Here we are, we could just have this chit chat and yell out ideas. Whereas I hadn't actually thought about what her boundaries were. And her boundaries were knowing that she had to do X amount of work in this period of time frame, and particularly doing videos and cutting and editing and whatever it might be, she had that time frame worked out. So it's understanding what your boundaries are, what are their boundaries, and sharing them. Because if you don't share, then they don't know.
Absolutely. So that is a great response to the woman who just asked that. And I think that, sometimes we can be a little fearful about having boundaries or stating what we want. And you talk about the importance of developing a boss mindset. And you indicated that a little earlier in this interview. How, other than setting up the systems and the structural part of stepping into the boss role, how can women who are stepping more and more into the leadership role in their own business cultivate the mindset to really inspire and lead their teams?
Look, I've always truly believed in our own self-development as well. We can get so worked into our own business of doing the doing, and we don't always get out of that mindset or out of that space that we're in. So I love going to lots of different conferences where there's so many people from different industries hearing about that. Going to Disney Institute, all these different things that you can learn from other leaders. But of course, you bring it back even closer to home. It could be somebody perhaps that you've worked with before in another organisation before starting your business, who may have been somebody that you looked up to. Call them, email them. People are very hesitant. They're thinking, oh, they won't remember who I am. But people do. And they could have shown you a great leadership style that you also want to develop. So, reach out to them, have that conversation. Do not say picking your brain. I can't stand that because when people go, "Can I pick your brain?"
Pick your brain. Gotcha.
Oh, no. It's what you want to do is say to them, "Look, I really respected you as a leader when we were in this role. Working in the organisation. Would there be an opportunity that I could sit down and just ask you now that I'm going into this role of having a team and how I lead them to gain some ideas from you? It might cost you, a coffee or a lunch, whatever it might be. It is a well worth investment of your time if it's somebody who has those really great leadership styles. Or otherwise, there's memberships, there's associations that you can certainly be a part of, particularly like HerBusiness. It's knowing who that tribe is that you can share your thoughts with people that sometimes will take those rose-tinted glasses off your eyes as well, and say to you, look, yes, it may work, but also have you thought about it another way? And how have I, worked with the team, etc. So there's multiple ways, but it's not just staying in your own lane. There's lots of podcasts, there's lots of books, but always self-development to me is important.
I love that. Yeah, because it's something that we need to learn to do. We weren't born or necessarily raised to be managing teams and delegating and doing any of that. So there's so much to learn when we step into that. And sometimes I've seen people recoil and say, well, no, I don't want a team. It's just too much. And yet we know the only way to create a sustainable business is to actually have people around us that we are delegating tasks to so that we can step more and more into the CEO role.
Definitely.
So one of the unique challenges that leaders face in larger organizations is managing team members who were once their peers, once their buddies. Now, this is less common, of course, in small businesses, but the relationships you have with your team when there's just a couple of people do change once you start to grow teams, and maybe you bring in a second in charge, or you bring in some middle management, or there's different levels of seniority. What can we do to support communication as we transition to these new ways of working with perhaps people we worked with when it was just the two of us?
Yes. Communication is that key word. You have to communicate really clearly to the person who's already in your existing team about what are we needing to grow our business. And it's not saying that they don't have that skill set, but what are we actually looking for? Let's divide our time up. We need somebody who is really good at, X, Y, Z, and have that open conversation. Now, certainly, here, Mary, she could go off and do a course, but then it's going to be taken away from that role. And does she really want to do it? And I think, unfortunately, sometimes we just have this assumption that the person would want that senior role or that leadership role, or that they want to take on marketing. And if I can just reflect, it was probably 13 years ago now, I had an EA and she's still with me. And I sat on a plane coming back from overseas with her and I said, tell me what you like about me as a boss and tell me what you don't. And it was a very long trip, but it was honesty, because I was giving her a whole lot of marketing work and a whole lot of research work, two different sides of the brain. Right. And this is where I just had the assumption, oh, yeah, she'll be fine. But no, she chose what area she wanted to be. So we need to ask those questions and then say, fine. So neither of us had that skill set. Let's go out and find the person who is going to be perfect for that role. And then when you bring them in, it's making sure that they feel welcome. However, there are times where we'll bring somebody in who, and if we haven't had that conversation, that existing employee may feel, have their nose out of joint, so to speak. They'll be upset that you didn't have that conversation, that you didn't give them that opportunity to even say no, because we've just assumed they wouldn't be interested. So communication is absolutely key. And certainly when you're bringing them in is, it's the three of you or the four of you together or more, sitting down, and that, I always say that first day when they come into your business is the absolute crucial point, whether they're going to stay or whether they're going to go.
And it's also a great place to set the structure and set the boundaries right in those early stages, rather than try and do it backwards. One thing I remember working for Virgin in my 20s, and I was in a marketing coordinator role, and the marketing manager left to go and start up an operation in Japan. We were in Australia at the time. And I stayed on, and they put in a new manager in above me. And I was too young and too inexperienced to have even qualified for that role. But I thought, well, maybe I could do it. Maybe if I was given a chance and some mentoring, I could have done it. But the conversation wasn't had with me. Now, I know in retrospect, I was nowhere near ready. But when someone does think they're qualified, but they're not, and that's why you didn't make the offer, do you still have the conversation?
Definitely, especially now with Gen Z, because their expectations, Susie, unlike yourself back then, was, well, I'm happy and I realize I'm young and I need X amount of years, and that idea that, the next person who gets the leadership role is the person who's been in the company the longest. Oh my goodness, it's just, yeah, they may have a good skill set, but they may not be a good leader. Whereas Gen Z in particular, and I'm seeing more and more of this in the last couple of years, they may come into a frontline role, a junior administration role, and they're looking for growth really quickly. They're not going to sit around for the 10-year tenure. They're going to be thinking in a few months' time, and they are very confident, many of them, to say, hey, I know this skill set, I can do it. And that's what I think where conversations are so important, because we look at somebody's resume, we interview them with the structured questions that we have to fit that role, but we don't always have that conversation afterwards to find out, what are they doing? Are they a really good gamer? Can they do coding? Are they good at Canva? What are all these things that they may do outside the workplace that you just assume, well, you don't assume, you just don't even ask that, oh, well, I've got to get somebody to do that. Once again, having that conversation, they could say, well, actually, I've done a course on that, or they don't even do courses, they just teach it themselves. Because if we don't allow them to at least put their hand up for that role, they'll move on somewhere else very, very quickly. So we do need to have those conversations. And yes, of course, if you do say to them, look, I love having you in this role. I can see you in this role in maybe 6 to 12 months' time. How about if we bring somebody in and I will have you shadowing them, getting them to learn? You've got to give them an idea that there is this career path for them, or that learning opportunity. That's key for them.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not the path. I know for me, my goal has always been with my team to have them leave more skilled, more qualified as they leave. Because we're a small business, we don't have a lot of opportunities for promotion, but we do have the opportunity for people to be highly skilled in so many areas. Let's talk about being social with and buddies with your team in that way. How do we manage social situations? Now, I know there'll be a lot of people listening who perhaps have remote teams, but assume you have a clinic or an office or a practice where people are there. I spoke to one of our members and she said, look, my thing is alcohol should never be a social outing with your team. She said, I'm always the first to leave. I let them carry on, but I don't sit there and socialize in that way with my team. What are your thoughts on social and team?
Yeah, look, it's that fine line, because you don't want to look like, well, I'm the boss and you're just the hired help. Alcohol, look, I can understand where the lady is coming from, but there will be times for celebration. Let's put it into context. Celebrating your achievements in the workplace are key. Too often, as small business owners, and not getting out of that mindset that we are the solopreneur, we just go from one achievement to the next. Okay, done that, tick it off, tick it off, tick it off. When we've got a team, we need to stop. We need to celebrate. Now, that could be a lunch, or yes, it could be that we're going to go and have drinks after work. But like that lady was saying to you, is you're not the one there going at the end of the night, well, dancing on the tabletop, because they are seeing you as a boss, and they respect you as a boss. So it may be you say, towards, whatever it might be, a couple of hours in, look, I've left, X amount of money on the bar. Enjoy yourselves, team. Look forward to seeing you all in the morning. Don't forget, we start at 8:30, and you have a little bit of a light joke. Because remember, they also want to have a little bit of a laugh and giggle too. But we have to think about being that boss, where that fine line is, and particularly even if we start having team members that are going into managerial roles. And this is where I see quite often that feeling of, well, they are my friends and I need to be friends with them. I'm not saying you dismiss them, Susie, but there has to be a line that you aren't still going out partying on a Saturday night, rolling in the gutter, but that's, some people think, well, that's right. Or allowing them to get away with things in the workplace. Well, they're my friends, so they've come in late, or they want to go home early, or they want that roster to be just around them if you've got, different shifts during the day. But fairness and understanding and respect are key. You have to be fair to everybody, because your rest of your team are looking at how you handle that person. And that's why your values are very, very important, but also those non-negotiable service and operational standards. Because when there has to be an opportunity for perhaps a disciplinary, conversation, it doesn't come down to I and you because we're friends and you're starting to squirm in your seat. It's more of, this is what the value is. This is what that non-negotiable service operation standard is. And when, whatever happened in their role, that's not the value. That's not that service standard. That's not that operation standard. And therefore it reduces that icky feeling because you're not personalizing. That they have chosen not to live or work by that value. They've chosen to do something opposite to that service or that operation standard. So that is important and to have in place. But I always laugh when Facebook and all those were coming out and young people be putting all these things, all these photos. They have a habit of creeping up on us. Here we are, this 20-year anniversary. Facebook always seems to pick out the anniversary photo that perhaps you really would like to forget about when you're raging at some party or at the front of a screaming concert, and it pops up and now everybody sees it. It is there for life. So as you know, Susie, over time, that what you put on social media is there forever. And so we do have to think about that as well. Yeah.
Right. And, as someone usually more mature than the people on your team, they're the sorts of things that you can mentor them about.
Yes.
This is kind of related to my last question, and this again came from a conversation with one of our amazing members, and she has a dispersed team. She said when leading a very small team, it's only her and her executive assistant in Australia. She has others offshore. She said sometimes it feels like it's my role to keep my assistant company, to chit-chat, to ask about personal things, because she doesn't have another team member on her level right there to share with. And she said, I don't really have the time or the inclination to do this, but I don't want her to feel lonely and leave somewhere else where there's perhaps more of a social life. She said, I feel guilty, I guess, for not giving her another team member. And then she went on to liken it like being a mum, feeling guilty about only having had one child and that child doesn't have any companions. She said, how do you walk that particular line? How do I ditch the guilt about not being the buddy?
Whose guilt is it? It's her guilt. Well, she believes there's this guilt. Has she had the conversation with her EA, say, look, I'm feeling guilty. Do you, I feel like I need to be here all the time. And the EA might be saying, particularly in their office, if I remember back to 2019, I'd sit there and I think I'd have to have a conversation every lunchtime with my EA. But she was wanting to sit there on her phone, look at her social media, check in with her children at preschool. And I just kept talking because I thought I've got to be this, show pony all the time. So once again, have a conversation with them because they may just need a break from you as well. We can't operate, like 12 hours in a vacuum in the workplace. We need to have that time out, but you don't have to have that feeling. You once again are the owner of the business. You can have those conversations where if you want to spend a little bit more casual time with them, you feel in the workplace instead of just sitting at two desks all the time, perhaps have a meeting by having a walk outside. I say that to a lot of my clients, in the workplace, particularly when you're a small business and you're just, both there sitting at your desk and you're talking, and then that rolls into lunchtime, have your time apart. But next time you're having a meeting, get up, go for a walk outside and talk together. It's really interesting, the conversations that you can have and the real depth of those conversations when you're not having to look across the desk into somebody's eyes because they're beside you. So, I think there's different ways of handling it, Susie, but I understand her guilt because I've been there. But then, wow, did I get a real slap, like wake-up call that, no, the expectation wasn't of me to do that. That was just me feeling the guilt.
Right. And so communication, going back to your point earlier, is such an important part. We can make up so many stories in our own head about what our team might be thinking about our behavior. And this next comment I had speaks right into that. And what she said is, I have a small team and work remotely. She said, for me, the perception or expectation is that I should be available all the time. And when I choose to go away or not work for a few hours, they feel they can do the same. So do as I say, not as I do, and how to set the boundary that it's your business and you can choose to work how you want. But that, so what she's saying is, as a boss, I might want to travel, I might want to be away. That is not necessarily the rules, I guess, for the rest of the team, but she's having this conflict within herself about, I should always be available because I'm the boss. I should not take time away. I should not go, for a hike for a few hours because I'm the boss and I should be available. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's interesting. I know, over my 30 years of business, I've met women that have put in their diaries, whether they're with a corporation or whether they're their own business or their EAs, they put in meetings, it'll be a meeting with somebody, and because they'll give them that 2-hour break to go on a walk, etc. Once again, this is your business, and we are feeling we're projecting all these thoughts onto other people instead of setting the rules, setting the boundaries, and having that discussion with people. And that may even be, in that very first interview, when we're here at work, this is the expectations, and certainly when they come through and they start, learning what your business is all about once they've joined your team. And there will be at times that I will be at a conference. Now, when you're at a conference, as you know, Susie, you may only be on the stage for 45 minutes or 20 minutes these days, but there's all the lead up to it. Yes. There's the afterwards. You can't just disappear. So you have to ensure that they understand what those boundaries are. But of course, it may well be that, you may be on a different side of the world, and so they may, you may say, look, I know we've got this project coming up. I will be available between this time and that time to call, or I'll respond by emails. And so people just don't always realise, if they haven't travelled before, or they don't even think about those timelines because it's not on their peripheral, then it's just making it really, really clear. But it's understanding they need some breaks too. And this is where, as particularly when we start off on this journey of building a team, that we have to ensure with them. I know I'm working with a team at the moment, and one of the managers said, oh, well, I send off all my emails at 2 a.m. And I said, oh, so why do you do that? And they said, oh, well, that's when I've got this really clear headspace. I said, oh, that's fine. I said, but when are you expecting that person who's receiving that email to respond? And they said, oh, not till they get to the work the next day. I said, oh, okay. So then I asked the respondent, so when? And they said, oh, well, we know they always send an email at 2 a.m. in the morning. So their body clock is now waking up at 2 a.m. and they're responding to it.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is wrong. The duty of care as employers, but once again, that hadn't been communicated. The person who was sending didn't clearly state, even, face to face, look, I'm crazy. 2 a.m. is a great time for me, or 4 a.m. feeding the baby or walking the dog or whatever it might be, or I'm in America. I can, I'll send these here now. I do not expect you to respond. Once again, particularly if they're new employees, or even if they'll think, oh, that's the boss. If I don't respond now, I may lose my job. Or, particularly if they're remote workers, that's a concern. What's a concern for everybody? Yeah. Make it really clear. Hey, send them out at this time. I'm not, and I will get, you're going to have a joke. I'll get really cross if you respond back at 2 a.m. But you haven't clearly communicated what your expectations are. So they just think, remember, a team member is always wanting to please you. So when, you give them a task to do, they want to please you. They want to make sure that you're happy with that. And if I can just tease that out a little bit more, Susie, is that recognition in the workplace is that for many, there will be, no matter what generation, but particularly for baby boomers and Gen X, they're not expecting the recognition. It's very different to our Gen Y, certainly our Gen Zs, and then we've got alphas coming into the workplace. They're 14, some of them are even in the workplace perhaps, that when they come to you as a leader, you've given them a task and they come back and they go, oh, Susie, just letting you know, I've just finished that. Does it look right? Now, I have leaders who turn around to me and say, oh, Michelle, I'm paying them to do the job. Just do the job. I don't need them to come back and check in. And I go, please flip that mindset. That's you in your being, that you do not need recognition all the time. what that person is doing, that employee, they are looking to ensure that they are pleasing you. Am I doing the right thing? Particularly if they're new into that role, or they could have been with the company for a long time, Susie, but this is something new that they're doing. They just want to make sure they're checking in. So please look at it, as in that positive mind frame and go, yeah, that you've done that perfectly, thanks. Or look, I love those first 3 paragraphs. Perhaps tweak that 4th one. Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks for the feedback. But let's change that thought about recognition in the workplace, because so many people see that as, oh my goodness, they just want a pat on the back. No,
they're
they
looking
don't.
for strokes. Yeah.
They just want to make sure, am I doing the right thing?
Well, especially for those of us who are Gen X, who might be listening, like, we never expected anything, no praise, no anything. We just got our work done. I'm being very generalist, of course. But and so it can feel like, oh gosh, do I have to praise them every 5 minutes? They get, but you bring to the fore the need for us as we don't need to be buddy, but we still want to be human, and we still need to realize that we are working with other humans. Yes, we cut them a check at the end of the week, at the end of the month. God, there's an old word, check. You know what I mean? But it is a relationship. And these people are supporting us to get our dreams, to get our visions. And so how do we build those relationships? You don't have to become an extrovert if you're an introvert. That's not it. But it is about setting those expectations early, as Michelle indicated. It is about having clear operating procedures so that people can follow a process and get work done without having to come back to you all the time. There is a way to socialize without going nuts, because in my experience, they want to spend time with each other. And I've had relationships where I've been really close with my boss a million years ago when I had jobs. And we would go out and we would drink and we would party together. And there's other times where we've been very, very distant. But I think there's a nice middle ground where you can have a great relationship, and you can even build some processes into your business. So, for instance, Michelle, this morning we had our team meeting, something we've done every Wednesday morning for as long as I've had a business. And part of the process is checking in on our statistics and where we're up to. But part of it is just checking in on each other and having a little bit of a chat about the weekend or the dog or the cycling challenge or how that person's mum's doing. And it doesn't take over the meeting, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it helps us get to know each other, especially when we have remote teams and we don't have the water cooler or the coffee room or the whatever to actually have those other conversations. And so I think it is a fine line, but I think that, and you do want to also maintain your altitude as the boss.
Yes,
and set those boundaries as you recommended, because that is what's going to build the trust and the respect from people, but also just being human and realize that we're all having this experience together, and our lives are crossing paths for months, years, maybe decades in some cases. And so how do we bring a little bit of humanity into that while also maintaining our boundaries? Thank you so much for this conversation.
I really loved it.
This is the work that you do all the time. I know that you have a gift for us, and it is about future-proofing our teams. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So, look, it's just, some insights and guides and tips there about looking at our teams now and how can we grow our business through them. And, those comments that you just made then, Susie, are absolutely perfect. It's about having that, you need to be a person. It's thinking about your behavior, that everything, having those values, having that positive culture. This is your vision. This is your business. Please share it. Please share it with your team. And so in this guide that I give you, it's talking about those values and some other points there, which I hope you enjoy and take away. But it's all about creating a business that your team will tell others, my goodness, you have to come and join us, because let's become a workplace of choice.
I love that. Thank you so much. We will put a link to that in the show notes. I'll give you the link to where you'll find that in just a moment. Michelle, is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody, that's listening to, for listening to us this morning, but also, it's that belief in yourself. This is your business, and start how you want it to end it. And that's really taking that time of looking at your values, and your personal values are your workplace values. Think about what are those actions and behaviors that you're going to model for your team. And even if they are a remote team, and you may never even see them. Like I've got staff that I've never even seen that have been with me for 20 years, is they need to feel that they are part of the business. And so if that means you've got to get in the car and go, drive six hours to whoop whoop and sit down and have some fun and have a meal with them, my goodness, the difference that will make. Or even, if you're going overseas and you can tie in a trip to see them, then they feel that they're part of the business, and they feel, that they're respected and they're valued and they're trusted and they're seen.
Thank you so much for the work you do. You make such a difference to so many workplaces. And thank you for being my guest. I'm so glad we had this conversation.
So am I. Thank you. You take care, Susie.
I absolutely love this topic because it's something, if I can toot my own horn, I think we do pretty well at Her Business. It's all about finding balance with your team, because while you want to gain respect from your team and remain in that leader role, that doesn't mean that you need to treat anybody badly. You can still show your team that you care about their lives and appreciate the work they do without crossing into buddy territory. So at Her Business, we have a specific process that I encourage everyone listening to steal because it works wonders for my team. Now, we have daily huddles for quick updates on projects, which are usually about 15 to 30 minutes, and they're pretty much straight to business. But every week we also have a full team meeting. And we've done this for 30 years. And in those meetings, we take time to answer 2 prompts that I want to share with you. The first is called What I Feel Like Saying. And essentially, this is time where every team member can quickly recap what they've done over the weekend, or share any major life events that have come up, or even a hardship that they're dealing with personally. Now, this is a ritual that we've upheld at Her Business since we started 30 years ago, and it serves 2 main purposes. One, it brings the team together, right? We're all human, and we all need those moments of human connection in our work days, especially when you're a small or remote team. And having scheduled time for that connection and opening up the floor for team members to share a fun anecdote or vent for a minute about something, it really brings everyone together. And it also means that those things aren't coming out at a different, more mission-critical time of the week, because we take the time for each other once a week to catch up. It means that we can be laser focused the rest of the week on what work needs to get done. The second prompt we have during our team meetings is all about acknowledgements. We encourage our team leaders to acknowledge themselves for something they did well that week that they would like some kudos for. Now, it can be professional, personal, or whatever they like. This is important because we're not accustomed to patting ourselves on the back. And if you're thinking about, incorporating this, be warned that it can be a little uncomfortable at first, and you might need to sit through a couple of silences. But your team will end up appreciating the outlet within just a few weeks. And the acknowledgements usually open up into patting others on the back as well, which is essential to a functioning team. Because each team member might be working on different tasks, and so they're not always aware of what another is doing, but these acknowledgements provide an opportunity for everything to click together. Now, we've been doing this 2-part process for years, as I mentioned, and it's worked wonders for our team's ability to work together. And this is a bit of a secret benefit of doing this, when your team gets closer and communicates frequently, they're more comfortable going to one another when problems or questions arise rather than coming to you, which is 1, more efficient, and 2, takes a little bit off your own plate. Now, while navigating this buddy to boss pipeline can be challenging if you're just starting, there are ways to do it while still showing your team that you appreciate them. Now, just because you're stepping into your leadership skills and stepping them up, it doesn't mean that you're turning into a Devil Wears Prada Meryl Streep. I want to give a big thank you to Michelle Pascoe for helping us cover an important topic. And Michelle's created a resource that I recommend that you pick up. It's called Future-Proof Your Leadership Team, and it's about creating a sustainable pipeline for future leaders in your organization. So especially if you're looking to grow your team and bring in other people that people are going to be reporting to, this is a really great resource for you. It's about building a culture of growth and excellence that will ensure your business's overall success and longevity, and a whole lot more. And I'm going to put a link to that over at our show notes page at herbusiness.com/266. So, if you would like to join other women business owners who are also growing teams, also going from buddy to boss, we have now made places available inside the Her Business Network. And as someone with a team, I know in the early days when I was growing a team, it was so important to talk to others who are in similar situations. So you can learn more about joining Her Business over at herbusinessnetwork.com. Now, over at herbusiness.com/266, you'll find a summary of what we've covered in today's episode, as well as contact information for Michelle and that fabulous resource that she's made available for us today. So I encourage you to join us in the next episode for more inspiring stories. I love doing this show for you, and anytime I get a comment from you on what you enjoyed or implemented, it really makes my day. So today I want to give a shout out to Karina Pelliconi from plumpedal.com.au. Now, Karina is one of our Her Business members, and she has an online store that sells statement jewelry for curvy women. So if you're looking for that next statement necklace or earrings, she is the person that you want to hook up with, and you'll find her at plumpedal.com.au. So she was listening to episode 256 called The Slow Growth Strategy for Long-Term Extraordinary Success. This is an interview I did with Leanne Haining. And she said, I absolutely love this story. Thank you for such a great podcast/interview. I'd love to learn more about partnerships and what type of partnership should we be looking for in business and how to go about creating them. Susie, it was such a great question you touched on in this topic. I felt there could be more on this topic for external partnerships and how they can benefit our business. And Karina, you are absolutely right. And that's exactly why just a few weeks ago, we had an exclusive session for our members on how to create collaborations and partnerships. Thank you, Karina, for your comment. Thank you for inspiring conversation. Thank you for listening. Now, if you've got an idea or a question for an upcoming episode, or you just want to reach out and tell me you enjoyed this episode, or you're taking something away, or you want to share anything with me about your business, you can write to me at podcast@herbusiness.com. That's podcast@herbusiness.com. Now, if you're a new listener for the show, welcome. I love having you here. Be sure to subscribe. Just hit subscribe or follow wherever you are listening, and that means that next week's episode will land right in your feed when it's available. Thank you so much for being here, and join me next time right here on the Her Business Podcast. Bye for now.